Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, good morning, everyone. Excuse me. Welcome to our GusNIP Nutrition Incentive Program RFA Technical Assistance webinar. We're looking forward to sharing some great information with you all this morning. We're going to give a moment for some more of our attendees to get into the room, and we're going to get started here in just a second. All right. Well, thank you all so much again for joining us, and we are hoping to share some great information with you all this morning. I'm going to introduce and turn it over to our national program leader for the GusNIP program, Dr. Chris Grimes, to go ahead and give you some welcoming comments before we go into logistics.
Good morning, everyone. It is good to see you all this morning for this Gus Schumacher Nutrition Incentive Program, Nutrition Incentive FY24 RFA Technical Assistance webinar. My name is Dr. Chris Grimes. I am one of the national program leaders that leads this GusNIP, the GusNIP effort. And we are thankful to have you all this morning on board to learn about the FY24 RFA, all the details, the intricacies of applying, about the program itself, about evaluation, about policy regarding SNAP-NAP, and other elements to aid you as you develop your applications for this year's funding opportunity. Over the course, and you're going to hear this a couple times, but over the course of this webinar, we want to make sure that you are aware that you don't have to hold your questions until the end. If you have questions during this webinar, there is a question and answer or Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and you can feel free to go ahead and type your question into that box. And we have experts that are on the panel today that can go ahead and answer that question during the presentation. And that way it will help you to keep from forgetting the question, or it might also help you understand the rest of the webinar as well. So I'm also thankful to have all of the panelists that we have on today that are going to help facilitate this effort. And we hope that it is edifying to all those who are here. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Ryan, and we will proceed with this webinar.
Thank you so much, Dr. Grimes. So I'm going to go ahead and share a few meeting logistics with you all this morning. Before we get started, we would like to cover a few housekeeping notes, if you will. If you're having any issues with audio or visuals today, please contact Zoom tech support. All participants should be muted throughout the process of this presentation. We're asking if you have any specific questions throughout the session for the presenters to please type them in the question and answer box, as Dr. Grimes has already shared. And we will be having some of our colleagues in the question and answer box answering some of these questions for you. As we go throughout this webinar, this will be recorded, and a link to the recording and the slides will be made available on our GusNIP Nutrition Incentive Program funding opportunity page where you downloaded the RFA. And that link will be shared in the chat in just a moment if it hasn't already. So also to share with you all, we do have access to interpretation services for this webinar. And so to access interpretation services, as you'll see on the screen, you're going to go to the globe icon at the bottom of your screen, then select the language that you would like to utilize. And with that, we're going to keep on going with our presentation. And I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Grimes to share with us our non-discrimination statement.
Before we get started with the full webinar, we do want to share with you the non-discrimination statement for the USDA NIFA. The link to this non-discrimination statement is in the chat box below. And so if you'd like to read that in full, you can. We want you to know that we take this seriously. And if you have any concerns or questions regarding this statement or anything during this webinar, you can feel free to contact us through the email or the phone number that's provided within the statement. Ryan?
Thank you, Dr. Grimes. So to share with you a little bit more as we get ready to share this program with you, I'm going to share with you all our GusNIP program team. And so first, I'd like to start off with our Deputy Director, Dr. Suzanne Sluka, who serves as our Institute of Food Safety and Nutrition Deputy Director. Then Dr. Steve Zing, who is our Division Director for the Division of Nutrition. Then we have our National Program Leader, Dr. Chris Grimes, who is the leader of the GusNIP portfolio, along with Dr. Mallory Canings. Then we have Dr. Sheila Fleischhacker, who is our National Science Liaison. Then our Program Specialist team, myself, Ryan Cornegay, along with Yamilis Ocasio. Then we have our Awards Management team members, Beth Curling and Maria Crespo Sechampo. Our Program Assistant, Ms. Kiva Shepard, for the Institute of Food Safety and Nutrition. And Dr. Stephanie Morris is the lead data scientist, along with Gabrielle Risley. And then we also have Jillian Kaplan with the Food and Nutrition Service and Jill Schaefer with our NAP program. And here you will have opportunity to see some of the contact information for our GusNIP team. If you have any specific questions about any specific parts of it, we suggest that you reach out to our team members or to any of the email boxes that you'll see here as well. Should you have any questions, please make note of them. If you have something that you want to discuss further from this RFA today, we'll be happy to share more information with you. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Grimes to share about the topics for discussion today.
Over the course of this webinar, which should take about an hour and a half, we are going to be covering several topics. We are going to give you a NIFA overview, or the National Institute for Food and Agriculture overview. We're going to share a program overview for GusNIP, the Nutrition Incentive Funding Opportunity. We're then going to walk through the request for applications, the RFA details on how that actually how you put together an application and what are some of the specific details of accomplishing that. We're going to look at the evaluation process, how those applications are evaluated. We're then going to look also at budgeting and awards management. And then at that time, we're going to hand it over to the NTAE, our technical assistance folks, that are going to walk through evaluation and the consultations that must take place for this program. And then finally, we are going to end with the Food Nutrition Service, where they will talk about SNAP-NAP policy. And at the very end, we will hold for about 15 minutes worth of questions. Next slide. Now, as we walk through this webinar, you're going to hear several, or you might read several different acronyms or initialisms. And so we wanted to make sure that you had those here in front of you. And so, of course, our acronyms over here, like GusNIP and SNAP, will be used quite often during this presentation. And our initialisms, like NI for Nutrition Incentive Program or PPR for Produce Prescription Program, will also be used. So you'll just want to keep track of those so that you don't get confused. There's a lot of them, and I understand that sometimes it can get confusing. So we want to provide that for you. Next slide. Now we want to provide just a bit of an overview of the National Institute for Food and Agriculture. The National Institute for Food and Agriculture is an extramural science funding agency within the USDA's research, education, and economics mission area. And so NIFA is responsible for much of the grant funding that takes place in the USDA. NIFA invests in and supports initiatives that ensure the long-term viability of agriculture and everything that it touches. And then NIFA also provides funding and strategic leadership for programs that ensure groundbreaking discoveries in agriculture-related sciences and technologies that reach the people who can put them into practice. Next slide. As you can see, NIFA covers many topics from advanced technologies to environment, human sciences, international programs, plants, and then also food and nutrition security, which is where GusNIP resides. So we have several different programs that are covered by NIFA that NIFA engages in. Next slide. We're now going to turn it over to Ryan so he can provide a program overview of the GusNIP Nutrition Incentive Funding Opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Grimes. So to start us off, we want to share some information with you all about what's new in our RFA for fiscal year 2024. And just to give you some notice, in the top right-hand corner, you'll see the page numbers on the RFA that the information we're sharing with you corresponds directly with. So for fiscal year 2024, what's new? Number one is that we've clarified in Part 1D of the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP policy, that the EBT card number may not be used in whole or in part to track SNAP participant and engagement with the GusNIP Nutrition Incentive Program. It removes the limitation of project outreach to census tracts where more than 12% of the population receives SNAP benefits and clarifies the use of innovation and technologies. This RFA also clarifies in Part 1D of the Nutrition Assistance Program block policy grants. And so this is the NAP program. Also, it includes all SNAP and or NAP requirements in the required specific program and incentive information section of the project narrative. This RFA also clarifies required attendance of the project director or the PD at the PD meeting each year. And lastly, this RFA clarifies that institutions of higher education that believe they are local, county, tribal, territory, or state government agencies must provide documentation in support of eligibility as a governmental agency in Field 12 of the grant application. Documentation must clearly identify that the university or cooperative extension is designated as an entity within the governmental agency structure, such as the Department of Agriculture, Department of Education, Department of Health, or etc. Now we're going to share about the purpose of the Nutrition Incentive Program. Nutrition Incentive Projects leverage the Food and Nutrition Service administered SNAP and NAP food assistance programs. All nutrition incentive projects provide fruit and vegetable incentives, and the ultimate purpose is to improve the nutrition and health of participants. Fruits and vegetables under this program are any variety of fresh, canned, dried, or frozen whole or cut fruits and vegetables without added sugars, fats, or oils and salt. These fruits and vegetables should be culturally appropriate. Now to share with you all some of the priorities for the Nutrition Incentive Program. All GusNIP Nutrition Incentive Program priorities are given equal consideration, and they include looking at maximizing the share of funds used for direct incentives to participants, use direct to consumer sales marketing, demonstrate a track record of designing and implementing successful nutrition incentive programs that connect SNAP or NAP participants and agricultural producers. Priorities also include to provide locally or regionally produced and fresh fruits and vegetables, especially those that are culturally appropriate for the target audience. It also includes a project design that provides incentives when fruits or vegetables are purchased using SNAP or NAP benefits, and in which the incentives earned may be used only to purchase fruits or vegetables. Priorities for this program also include having demonstrated the ability to provide services to underserved communities, and also to include coordination with multiple stakeholders. Priorities for this program also look into offering supplemental services in high-need communities, including online ordering, transportation between home and store, and delivery services. It also includes food retailers that are open for extended hours, and most are all days of the year. Priorities for this program also include testing for innovative or promising outreach and promotion strategies within the limits of SNAP-NAP policy. And lastly, Priorities include involving a diversity of types of firms, which would include convenience stores, supermarkets, or farmers markets. So now that we share with you some of the priority specific entities there, we want to also share with you some of the communities and geographies that are priorities for this program, specifically our underrepresented communities and underrepresented geographies. We are making progress, but there is still work that is left to do. Additionally, NIFA encourages projects that address the following: serving underrepresented communities, such as tribal communities, communities of color, LGBTQIA+ communities, individuals with disabilities, veterans, rural and remote communities, insular areas, or communities with residents predominantly living under the federal poverty line, and or serving underrepresented GusNIP Nutrition Incentive Program geographies, such as the state of Alaska, American Samoa, the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas Islands, Connecticut, Delaware, Guam, Idaho, Kansas, Maine, New Hampshire, North Dakota, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Vermont, Wisconsin, and Wyoming. And as a note, just to share with you, communities and geographies that are not listed here are still eligible to apply as long as they meet the eligibility criteria that I'll be sharing with you in just a moment. So eligible entities and partners. To be eligible to apply for the GusNIP Nutrition Incentive Program, you must be a nonprofit organization or a governmental agency. Institutions of higher education that are local, county, tribal, territory, or state government agencies must provide documentation in support of eligibility as a government agency. Colleges and universities are strongly encouraged to contact NIFA for an eligibility determination prior to preparing an application. Applicants for GusNIP grants are encouraged to also seek and create partnerships with public or private, nonprofit, or for-profit entities, including links with academic institutions, including minority serving colleges or universities, and or other appropriate professionals, community-based organizations and local government entities, and or partnering entities for the purposes of providing additional resources and strengthening under-resourced communities. So now to share with you some of the program areas specific to the Nutrition Incentive Program. First, we have our pilot projects. These are new entrants at the early stages of nutrition incentive programs or project development. And this is an opportunity for these smaller or less experienced organizations to propose projects that have smaller budgets and less complex administration. Then for our standard projects, these are new and established groups that are developing and evaluating nutrition incentive projects at the tribal, county, district, multi-county, territory, or statewide scope. And lastly, we have our large-scale projects, which are multi-county, territory, statewide, tribal nation, and regional nutrition incentive projects with the largest audience of all nutrition incentive projects. Organizations in this category are not new to implementing nutrition incentive projects, and projects will test and evaluate innovative promotion and outreach strategies to increase fruit and vegetable purchases and or consumption. Now to go a step further and share with you the federal budgets and the duration for each of these specific program areas. First, for our pilot projects, or FPP, as you will see in the RFA, these projects are up to $100,000 for up to 1 year of duration. Then for our standard projects, FIP, as you'll see, these standard projects are for up to $500,000 and they can last for up to 4 years. Then lastly, our large scale projects, FLSP, these projects can start at $500,001 and they can go up as well in budget. And these projects are for also 4 years as well, up to 4 years. Now to share with you program policy. As I shared earlier about fruits and vegetables under this program, fruits and vegetables are a variety of fresh, canned, dried, or frozen, whole or cut fruits and vegetables without added sugars, fats, or oils and salt. Then to understand some of the incentive models specifically for this nutrition incentive program. We have the fruits and vegetables for fruits and vegetables. This would be a SNAP or NAP participant purchasing fruits or vegetables using their SNAP or NAP benefits and then having them receive incentives that are redeemable only for the purchase of fruits and vegetables. The next one we have as an incentive model is any SNAP or NAP eligible food for fruits and vegetables. This is a SNAP or NAP participant purchasing any SNAP or NAP eligible food using their SNAP or NAP benefits and then receiving incentives that are redeemable only for the purchase of fruits and vegetables. And lastly, we have the incentive model of fruits and vegetables for any SNAP or NAP eligible food. This is where a SNAP or NAP participant would purchase fruits or vegetables using their SNAP or NAP benefit and then receiving incentives that are redeemable for the purchase of any SNAP or NAP eligible food. Now to understand and share with you a little bit more about some of the requirements for this program, may I share with you about the GusNIP NTAE consultation. Here is where you will be required to receive a letter of support. All applicants are required to have a consultation session with the GusNIP NTAE Center for free one-on-one support and to review common mistakes. To document completion of this consultation, all applicants must include a verification letter from the GusNIP NTAE Center in their proposal in field 12. And a little bit more information about how you can do that will be shared later in this presentation. Now to share with you about the required comprehensive evaluation program. Just to share with you, first off, more of this will be covered by the NTAE later on, but to share specifically the rights and privacy of individuals who participate in NIFA-sponsored research must be protected at all times. This includes annual human subjects assurance statements that the project has been reviewed and approved by an institutional review board or determined exempt from review. And also just to give you an understanding of the comprehensive evaluation project that you'll see in the RFA, participants in this program are applicants that are awarded are required to participate. They're required to collect the minimum core data set and to collaborate with the Nutrition Incentive Program Training, Technical Assistance, Evaluation and Information Center, or NTAE, as we've shared with you today. And lastly, to contribute to the minimum core data set to the NTAE. So just to kind of share a little bit more about this comprehensive evaluation piece of the GusNIP Nutrition Incentive Program, specifically around pilot projects. Because the GusNIP pilot projects are in the earliest stages of development, they are not required to submit comprehensive program evaluation like the standard and large-scale projects are. For our pilot projects, they are encouraged to work with the NTAE Center to include GusNIP comprehensive program evaluation or participant level and firm level metrics to be well positioned for future funding opportunities. Now to share with you another requirement for this specific RFA, and that is the state or territory SNAP or NAP agency. You are required to receive a letter of support from your state or territory SNAP or NAP agency. Applicants must submit a letter of support from applicable SNAP or NAP state or territory agency, and it must explain the specific role of the agency, including any activities that the agency is expected to conduct in support of the projects. This could include in identifying SNAP or NAP participants and or sending them any correspondence related to the project. This specifically is to identify any state or territory agency systems, including EBT systems, required to implement the proposed project, along with an acknowledgement of who will bear the costs associated with any system changes, if applicable. And there will be more to come about this in the FNS portion of the presentation. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Grimes to share with us about application details and documents.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate that. Now that you've heard an overview of the GusNIP program, now we want to talk specifically about the application, what goes in your application, what are some of the specific details regarding that. Next slide. To begin, let's talk about application submission. Now, before I start, I do want to say one thing, is that before you begin writing your proposal, make sure that you read through the entire RFA. The RFA, while we are sharing information during this webinar, the core information about the RFA during this webinar, we need you to understand that there is no substitute for reading the entire RFA, and it should be considered the primary reference document for this funding opportunity. And so read the RFA, read it again, and make sure that you have all your questions answered. If you have questions about the RFA, of course, you can submit those to us. Now, let's talk a little bit about application submission. Applicants first must apply electronically. There are no other methods or there is no other response that is accepted. Part 3 of the NIFA Grants Application Guide contains detailed information regarding the grants.gov registration process. When applying for a NIFA award, it is important to reference the version of the guide that is included in the specific funding opportunity application package. Application documents must be in portable document format, or PDF, to be accepted by NIFA, including your narrative and budget justifications. So every document that you submit to this funding opportunity must be submitted as a PDF. Grants.gov may accept other formats, but NIFA does not. And so every document, whether it be your narrative, your budget justification, your letters of support, your business plan, data management plan, all of these documents must be in a PDF format. So NIFA does not allow for other formats, and you should not use third-party PDF builders either. Next slide. Now let's talk a little bit about the project narrative, specifically for pilot programs. Within 10 pages, you're going to give an introduction to communities involved in the project and the benefit to the communities. This all can be found on pages 28 through 41 of the RFA. You're going to talk about personnel and resources of the organizations and the communities involved in the project. In this part of the narrative, you're going to be talking about project goals. You're going to be talking about intended outcomes. You're going to share about the relationship of this project to the GusNIP Nutrition Incentive Program, purpose, and priorities. You're going to discuss activities that you intend to, that are expected to help achieve the goals that you've listed. In addition, you're going to share about your evaluation procedures. This must include a process evaluation or formative evaluation, and it's strongly encouraged to include GusNIP comprehensive program evaluation, core participant level, and firm level metrics to be well positioned for future funding opportunities. In addition, there is the non-supplantation clause. What does this mean? It means that this project cannot displace current activities. It must be new, expanded, or enhanced. And finally, there must be specific program and incentive information clarified in the project narrative. I should mention here that applications exceeding the page limit will be returned without review. Next slide. For GusNIP standard and large-scale project applications, we want to mention about the project narrative that it is a 15-page limit. And I believe we missed the slide for the pilot project, but the project narrative for the pilot project narrative is 10 pages. For the standard and large scale, it's 15 pages. So that's one major difference that you'll want to include. But in Field 8, that's where you're going to include your project narrative. It's got, for the large scale and standard, it's going to be a 15-page limit. It's going to have 1.5 point spacing, 12-point Times New Roman font, written text, figures, and tables within the 1-inch margins are to be included. Now, all of that must be included within that 15-page limit. In addition, on the pilot projects that are 10-page limits, all of that must be included in that 10 pages as well. Let's go ahead back, Ryan. Thank you. Back one slide. Forward one. There we go, right there. In addition to this 15 pages, if you are resubmitting a proposal, then you have one additional page to answer or respond to reviewers' questions or comments. So if you're resubmitting a proposal from a previous year, then you do have one extra page above and beyond the 15-page limit, or the 10-page limit if you're referring to a pilot project. So that one page can be a response to reviewer comments, but that's only in a response, and that's only in a resubmission of a project. Also in Field 9, you have the bibliography and the reference cited page. That's a required document. In Field 12, you're going to upload a logic model that's no more than 1 page. In Field 12, you're also going to upload a data management plan, no more than 2 pages. In Field 12 as well, you're going to upload a business plan, no more than 5 pages. And in Field 12, you're also going to upload your letters of support, no more than 2 pages each, including your state, territory, SNAP-NAP agency letter and your GusNIP NTAE center letter. Now, again, I just we'll hang here right on this slide. I want to emphasize that with pilot projects, it's a 10-page narrative. For standard and large scale, it's also a 15-page limit. Next slide. For your project narrative for standard and large scale projects within that 15 pages, you're going to describe, again, introduction to communities involved in the project and the benefit to the communities. It's very similar to the pilot project. Personnel and resources of the organizations and communities involved in the project. You're going to talk about your project goals and intended outcomes, the activities that are going to help achieve those goals, the relationship to GusNIP Nutrition Incentive Program purpose and priorities. And then here's a real important key difference. In the standard and large-scale projects, the evaluation must include, it's not a recommendation, it's mandatory. It must include GusNIP comprehensive program evaluation, core participant level, and firm level metrics. In addition, you also need to discuss sustainability. How will this project be carried out beyond the funding opportunity or once the funds have been used? Again, the non-supplantation comment here is that it cannot displace current activities. It must be new, expanded, or enhanced projects. And finally, specific program and incentive information must be listed. I want to mention again that applications exceeding the page limit will be returned without review. So for pilot project narratives, 10 pages, unless you are adding an extra page as a response to reviewers. And for large scale and standard, it's 15 pages unless you're adding the 1 extra page for response to reviewers. Next slide. Now we're going to talk about the proposal evaluation process. So once the proposals have been uploaded by the due date, what happens now? I should also mention before we continue with evaluation that it is important that your proposals get uploaded on time. If they're 1 minute late, they will not be accepted. So make sure that your proposals, that your applications are uploaded in grants.gov on time. Now, For evaluation, this can be found on RFA pages 44 through 48. The initial screening for eligible organizations, the page length requirements, and all the required forms, and making sure that they're in PDF files. The budget must be within the dollar ceiling. Letters of support from SNAP implementing agency partners, and GusNIP NTAE Center. All this information is going to be screened. All these required documents are going to be screened to make sure that they're all there. That's the first part of the evaluation process. After that, peer review using the appropriate evaluation criteria, which we'll talk about here shortly, for the program area priority will be conducted. Where proposals are found to be equally meritorious based on peer review, selection for funding will be weighed in favor of proposals aligning with and advancing the GusNIP grant program purpose and priorities, including serving underrepresented geographies and underrepresented communities. SNAP policy analyst review will also take place for adherence to the SNAP program rules and regulations. And finally, if the applicant has received USDA grant funds in the past, then a history of compliance is going to be screened with grant requirements. So that's also going to be checked out to make sure that the individual or the organization has complied with grant requirements in the past. So all of that is part of the evaluation process. Next slide. What about the peer review process? How does this look? First, and this can be found on RFA pages 44 through 48, proposals are assigned for review to at least 3 reviewers with expertise in the proposed within the proposed topic. So the review panel is set up of peers that have expertise in this area, and then each proposal will be reviewed by 3 of those experts. Reviewers will then produce individual reviews of each proposal, evaluating the strengths and weaknesses. After that, the individual reviews are used to begin a panel discussion with other reviewers that are on the review panel that are serving for this funding area. And finally, through these discussions, peer review panelists come to a consensus on the final rating and ranking of these proposals. Next slide. Now, what is the criteria for these different projects? The GusNIP pilot project evaluation criteria is as follows, and it can be found on pages 44 through 48. Number 1, alignment with GusNIP Nutrition Incentive Program priorities. Number 2, advancing purpose of the GusNIP Nutrition Incentive Program. Community benefits, project goals, objectives, intended outcomes, qualifications of the organizations involved in the project, evaluation, timeline, and budget. All of these things will be taken into consideration as the panelists, the reviewers, are reviewing each of the applications for each pilot project that has been submitted. Next slide. What about standard and large scale? Similar to pilot projects, but let's walk through them. Again, found on pages 44 through 48, alignment with GusNIP Nutrition Incentive Priorities, advancing the purpose of the GusNIP Nutrition Incentive Program. We're going to take into account community benefits, the project goals, objectives, intended outcomes, qualifications of the organizations involved in the project, evaluation, and then sustainability is a key. Reviewers are going to look at the sustainability plan, and finally the timeline and budget. Next slide. What are some common mistakes to avoid in this as you are writing these proposals? First off, make sure that all of your entire proposal meets all the formatting requirements. That goes from the font, the size of the font, line spacing, margins, number of pages, and that all of your documents are in PDF format. I can't say that enough. Make sure that all of your documents are in PDF format. You want to make sure that you have a bibliography. You also want to make sure that you have letters of support from the NTAE and SNAP-NAP. These are common things that are left off out of applications, which will cause your project or your proposal, it possibly will not get accepted. And so we want to make sure that you have the best chance possible. And again, if the RFA lists a required document, you want to make sure to include that. So make sure to go through that RFA multiple times and check the boxes to make sure that everything is included. Make sure that you understand SNAP-NAP policy and regulations so that when whatever you're proposing in your project is actually allowed. Review your budget to make sure that it's within the maximum award amount, and be very attentive to the due date. Again, late submissions will be automatically declined. Next slide. We often get questions from applicants about when they are going to hear something about their project, their proposal, when they're going to be notified of whether or not they were funded or whether or not they need to be thinking towards a resubmission the following year. Here's the timeline for competitive programs. 1 to 3 months. That includes request for application, that the release for the RFA to the public, proposal writing and planning for your project, and then when the proposals are due. So all of that takes place in between 1 and 3 months. The next 2 to 3 months is when those proposals are going under peer review, the peer review process, which is what we've just spoke about. And then the final 1 to 2 months is when proposal funding notifications are sent out and awards are finalized and they are made to the successful organizations. On average, a competitive program will take about 6 to 9 months from the RFA release to the award being made to the organization. So this is a time-consuming process from start to finish, and we really do appreciate your patience as we go through it. Next slide. I want to conclude my portion of this webinar by discussing the opportunity that you have to volunteer to serve as a reviewer. And so one of the best ways to learn about a program is to actually serve as a reviewer on a panel for other proposals. Now, I do want to emphasize that if you are planning on submitting an application for this particular funding opportunity, you cannot serve as a reviewer. So you cannot serve as a reviewer at the same time that you're also trying to compete for funds in that funding opportunity. However, if you're interested in learning about a program, you're not sure that you want to apply this year, but you want to learn more about the program, you can volunteer to serve as a reviewer. The link has been placed in the chat, so you can click on that and you can put all your information in there, and we'll have your information so that in the future, either for this funding opportunity or in the future, we might be able to call upon you to help serve in that capacity. I hope I answered all your questions regarding the application process. Now I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth Curling, who is going to talk about awards management and those items. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Grimes, and welcome everyone. Thanks for your attention. I know this is a very long webinar and we have a lot of information to share. We really appreciate you being here. I'm in NIFA's Awards Management Division, which means I help applicants and our awardees navigate the grant life cycle. So while you're preparing these very programmatic heavy documents that Dr. Grimes reviewed, I'm going to introduce some of the additional administrative forms you'll be working through to help support your application. We're going to look at lobbying, the matching requirements of GusNIP, the budget and justification as it's structured in the RFA and in your application. What is the allowable indirect cost recovery for the GusNIP program? What does it mean to have a subaward restriction? And if your proposal is recommended for funding, what you can expect during that negotiation process so you can start to inform yourself and be aware of those next steps should they occur. Next slide, please. Okay, certification of lobbying activities. When you submit your grant in grants.gov, you will be automatically certifying that you understand the compliance to disclose lobbying activities. That can be both a final step for your organization or a first step, depending on your situation. So if your organization does participate in lobbying, there is an additional form called the SFLLL, Disclosure of Lobbying Activities form, that you will need to include in your application. We have a link to that we'll provide in the chat. Disclosure of those activities is very important. Failure to report lobbying activities is punishable by fines. So we want to make sure if that applies to your organization, you are aware and you are faithfully participating in that. Next slide, please. The GusNIP program, all three of the program types that Dr. Grimes reviewed and that Ryan also reviewed, are pilot, standard, and large scale projects, all require what we call a dollar for dollar, or said another way, a 100% match. So for every federal fund that you apply for, every federal dollar, you must bring a matching dollar with you as part of that application. Those dollars can be cash, in kind. They can also come from third-party contributors. We will anticipate as part of your application, if you have in-kind contributions, that you have fairly evaluated those contributions. That could include use of facilities, equipment, or services. Match can come from tribal government, state government, territory government, local government, and private sources. Federal money cannot be used for match except for in very specific examples, such as with tribal agencies. And we've listed an example there in the third bullet that you may review if applicable to your organization. When we're reviewing for match, we use very standard guidelines, and those are not meant to be secret. They're available and they are used across all federal agencies as part of review criteria. So we rely on what's called Uniform Administrative Requirements, or Uniform Guidance. Subpart D, 200-306 is specific to cost share or matching. And we'll get into the budget here in a little bit, but when we're reviewing budgets and allowability of costs, we use Subpart E, cost principles. Matching documentation must be provided in your application for all years of your proposed project at the time the application is submitted. We ask that within your budget narrative that you submit a list of your matching sources, and that list should categorize the name of the organization, the dollar amount or value of each match, and how the match will be allocated to the project. Meaning, if you are providing a cash match, or you're purchasing supplies, what supplies are you purchasing? We will get into that also as we get to the budget, but please always be mindful that when you are describing your match dollars, we're looking for you to be as specific with those dollars as you are with describing and justifying your federal dollars. Match must be for costs incurred specifically for the project and during the project period. So you also want to be planning ahead for when these projects may start and not having your match come in too soon before the project or too late after the project period. And costs must be for those normally allowed under cost principles and that are specifically identifiable and directly benefiting the project. Meaning that if a cost is not allowed as a federal cost, we're also not going to allow it as a match. So you have to be aware of those cost principles and be applying those principles equally to your federal costs as well as your match. Next slide, please. Okay, projects unable to meet their match requirements will not be funded, or the funding may be reduced. So as a reminder, this is a one-to-one match program. So if you are unable to produce that one-to-one match, we would reduce your federal funds so that there is a one-to-one match if your match dollars were to be less than your federal request. It is the NIFA requirement that a complete list of matching sources is maintained by you as the grantee organization. And it is your responsibility to both secure and expend matching funds in an appropriate manner. NIFA monitors compliance with match requirements by doing random desk audits or site reviews during the period of performance. And we would anticipate, if there were such a review, that you would have the same level of detail for your match documentation as you would for any federal fund expenditure. Next slide, please. What's not allowable as match? This is important to keep in mind. The funds that were provided by another organization for use on another project would not be an allowable source of match for GusNIP. We call that a double dip. Funds that were provided by another federal agency or for another federal award are typically not acceptable. Please remember that tribal agency example we spoke of earlier as an exception. Program income expected to be earned during the project period is not an allowable source, nor are indirect rates that are applied above what would be the allowable portion of indirect cost rate recovery. Specific to GusNIP and to our relationship with SNAP-NAP and the administration of SNAP-NAP, you may not use 50% state territory SNAP-NAP administrative costs as part of your match. And also, if you are partnering with a for-profit entity as part of your project, please be mindful that there is a very explicit statutory requirement that services of employees for the for-profit entity, including their salaries or expenses, may not be covered by that employer. Next slide, please. Okay, it's probably very tiny on your screen, and I apologize for that, but you will see this when you download the grants.gov application package. This is the last page of your budget, and you should be seeing it as a cumulative budget. There are 3 columns, one for federal, the middle is your non-federal or your match column, and the third is simply a total of those. So you want to be very explicit when you're describing to us, what are your federal costs, what are your non-federal costs, and applying cost principles equally throughout that process. When you're writing your budget justification, please include separate justifications for your federal and for your matching. Don't combine it in the narratives. Even if your staff, you're using a cash match to cover part of your staff time, and you're also drawing federal funds to support their efforts, you might want to talk about that person or those staff individuals and then say, you know, it's a 50-50 split, but it really is more helpful for our staff while reviewing and for the panelists while reviewing to include those as separate documents or a page break between the documents so that we can clearly add up what are your federal costs and what are your matching and compare that back to the budget that you've submitted. We've talked about this several times already, but the level of detail required for federal funds in your federal budget, you need to match that level of detail with your matching funds. And if a cost is unallowable in the federal budget, it's also unallowable as match. So that might come down to part of our negotiation process further down the road, you know, past panel and past recommendation. If there's a cost that's revealed as unallowable, we'll often have that discussion with you as an applicant one-on-one and discuss if there's other opportunities for costs that can be covered to meet your goals. And this is the final bullet on this page is just a reminder also, if you're partnering with for-profit entities, we're going to ask on your budget narrative to please be explicit in that you understand that you're either excluding salaries and those unallowable expenses while partnering with the for-profit, or if you are using those sources as match, that you're explicitly working with a nonprofit entity, and that would be allowable in that case. And if you have questions about that, please don't hesitate to reach out. Next slide, please. Another very important part of the GusNIP program, and one that we carefully like to review and keep track of throughout a grantee's experience and life cycle, is the total fruit and vegetable incentive dollars. So you might have federal funds, you might have non-federal funds that you're using to maximize the benefit of this program, but we ask wherever it is in your budget that you please summarize for us in a very succinct way what your total fruit and vegetable incentive dollars are and which categories they're coming from. That way our reviewers will have access to that information, and we will also as NIFA staff. So an example would be if incentives are included in other direct costs, as well as if you're working with a subaward site, they are also distributing incentives. So you've built that into the subaward agreement. If you have sources from those two different line items, you would tell us in your justification, I've added those two together, and this is my total incentive going towards this project. Next slide, please. All right, Ryan went through this early in the presentation, but new this year for FY24 is the requirement to attend PD meetings if and when they occur. So we encourage you to think ahead, build this in as domestic travel throughout the life of the grant, and be prepared when those opportunities come, because our grantee community really benefits from attending those, and you'll want to as well. Next slide, please. Indirect cost recovery. So RFA page 41 reviews the different indirect cost recovery options for the GusNIP program, and GusNIP allows for the full recovery of indirect costs based on a negotiated rate. That's also to say some of our programs here at NIFA have a cap. You could not exceed a certain percentage. That does not apply to GusNIP. So if you have a negotiated rate or a NICRA, you are welcome to apply that to the grant. If you do not have a negotiated rate, you may elect to use what we call the 10% de minimis or 10% modified total direct cost rate. That is also common throughout all of our federal agencies. It might be common to what your entity does already. And then the third option available to you is to waive indirect cost recovery altogether. Indirect costs are calculated on the federal portion only and of your budget. So when you're preparing those documents, determine what your federal request is, apply the rate to that portion of the budget only, and then that will be your allowable indirect cost recovery. And we do have a website specific to indirect costs. It can be confusing for folks when they're just getting used to the federal assistance programs and how to apply for indirect costs and negotiate. So there's opportunities for training and to learn from our indirect cost website. Next slide, please. This is specific to that 10% de minimis rate that we spoke of. It's important to remember that once you elect to use the de minimis rate, you must use that consistently for all federal awards until you choose to negotiate, at which you may do anytime you have a federal award. We don't want to see a grantee in a situation where they're applying 10% to this grant and a different percent to another grant, and sometimes they're using their NICRA. You should be very consistent in your application of these rates, regardless of which agency you're applying to. Next slide, please. GusNIP very much encourages partnership. Many applicants will elect to work with a variety of partners, and subawarding is very common. However, we also appreciate that the prime entity will do the substantive portion of the work. And so the RFA includes on page 39 a subaward restriction, and it states that no more than 33% of the project, as determined by the budget, may be subawarded without NIFA prior approval. So that does not mean that you are limited only to 33% with no other option. What it does mean is that we ask that you have a conversation with the national program leader, someone like Dr. Grimes, during the application period so that we can better understand your goals and determine if exceeding a 33% limit is appropriate for your application. Next slide, please. Duplicate and multiple submissions. So NIFA will accept just one GusNIP application for your applicant organization. That does not limit you to only one submission in grants.gov. So if you submit your application and you go to bed that night and you wake up in the middle of the night and think, I've forgotten form X, you are welcome to resubmit your application. So correct whatever error you've identified, clarify something that you previously left, unclarified, and resubmit that application. Please know NIFA will accept the last application received, and we will automatically disqualify previously submitted applications. And that way, every applicant is left with just one application that is very strictly accepted by that due date that Dr. Grimes alluded to before. And then the last slide, well, almost the last slide, I promise, that I wanted to share is about that organizational management information. So this is on page 48 of the RFA, and it talks just a little bit about what that process is like prior to award. So this slide applies primarily to entities and organizations that are recommended for funding. And it talks about some of the early steps we will take as an agency to review and re-verify, in some cases, financial management and internal controls information at your organization. That's important to us. We want to make sure that we are aware of your financial situation, of your ability to properly manage these funds, should that be an opportunity for your organization, and that we are good stewards of these funds. So we might be looking at a single audit if your organization participates in that. If your organization does not participate in single audit, we may be asking you for some financial records, details of your cost accounting system, auditing arrangements, how do you compensate your employees? If you have other federal awards, you might be asking statement of purpose and powers like your bylaws, just trying to understand a little bit more about your organization. So that can be a heavy lift at times for organizations. So we always want you to know upfront that that will be an expectation of our recommended applicants. And then before I pass it over, I want to provide in the chat and lift up here as well that there are lots of resources for you as an applicant. Hopefully you've been to our GusNIP webpage. I can't take credit for it, but the team and those behind it have done a fantastic job highlighting really important aspects of the RFA, including a frequently asked questions page, links to the webinars like this one today, and the recordings when they're available, as well as additional applicant resources. And then if you have additional questions or you're curious about other opportunities at NIFA, we have a broader scope of grant resources that includes a funding opportunities page. We have many, many, many other RFAs and programs that you may be interested in. You may be curious to learn more about the competitive grant flow chart or the process we're using. When is it an applicant that needs to take action? When is it a NIFA staff person that needs to take action? When is it in panel? That flow chart will walk you through that process, so you have a common understanding of what's happening to your application throughout the process. We have additional grant training opportunities. There are oftentimes live webinars that are an option for you to attend to learn more about NIFA, learn more about grant writing, learn more about how to manage a grant, and then those are recorded oftentimes and available to you as well. Our policy guide, for those that really like to dig into the details, we have a several hundred-page policy guide that will point you towards how we make awards, how we determine if a PD is eligible to serve in that role, all the way down to how to draw your funds from ASAP once that becomes part of the process. We went through the indirect cost page, of course, and then the application guide that Dr. Grimes has alluded to. You want to read through that thoroughly so you understand our expectations and grant applications. And then also GusNIP programs, it's public information, what our community is doing in the projects that they're executing. And so you can use resources like our CRIS website to help you understand what other communities are doing and how they've structured their programs. And you can use those to, to generate examples and to ideas of what you may do as part of your work. So we encourage you to look through those and to understand where the community is right now. And with that, I have the wonderful opportunity to pass it over to the National Nutrition Incentive Training Technical Assistance Evaluation Information Center. That is a mouthful. That's why we call it the NTAE. So take it away, guys. Really appreciate you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Beth. Good morning. My name is Rachel Ho. I am with Fair Food Network. Hold on, let me fix my view real quick. Okay, great. Great. Again, hi, my name is Rachel. I'm with the with Fair Food Network. We are a member of the, as Beth said, the Nutrition Incentive Training Technical Assistance Evaluation Information Center. We call ourselves the NTAE. You might also have heard us called the Nutrition Incentive Hub. We'll explain that more in a moment, but we are happy to be here today and to share a little bit more about the resource opportunities that we have for you, and also to give you more information on your required letter of support from the NTAE. So next slide, please. Great. So about the Nutrition Incentive Hub, some of you I see here, you've worked with us for many years. So hello, welcome back. I'm excited to see you applying again. And for those of you that are new, the Nutrition Incentive Hub, we are a coalition of partners that was created by the NTAE, and we support GusNIP grantees, applicants, and just programs in general that are interested in nutrition incentive and produce prescription programs. So we work nationally with programs to help them apply for GusNIP, to run their GusNIP programs. And we are just here for you at all stages of your GusNIP grant. So we are funded by the Farm Bill, as is this GusNIP funding opportunity that you're learning about today. So our goal is to make safe and nutritious food available for all Americans. So next slide, please. Great. So here is the spread. This you do not need to know for your application, but this is just to give you a sense of when we say the NTAE or the Nutrition Incentive Hub, who are we talking about? So we are in a wonderful cooperative agreement with USDA NIFA, and the NTAE Center is led by our partners, our colleagues at the Gretchen Swanson Center for Nutrition, who will share a little bit more about their work and the evaluation requirements of this grant in a few moments. So they are the leads, and then the leading partners, we provide resources around reporting and evaluation, which is led by the Gretchen Swanson Center for Nutrition, produce prescription services, which is led by our teammates from the University of California, San Francisco, who you might have met with if you applied for a produce prescription grant, and then my team, the Fair Food Network. We lead the implementation and focus also on Nutrition Incentive Program. And we are also very lucky to work with our specialists who have topical area expertise. The Michigan Farmers Market Association, based in Michigan, they specialize in working with farmers markets, CSAs, farm direct related resources, and also produce prescriptions. The Food Trust, which is based in Philadelphia, has expertise in SNAP Ed and working with corner stores. And then our partners at the National Grocers Association Foundation, working with independent grocers, grocery stores, brick and mortar retail locations. So just so you know, when you reach out to us, one of us at the NTAE, we are really supported and uplifted by this whole team of experts across the country. So next slide, please. Great. So now in terms of the RFA specifically, we're here to support you in many, many ways for your application. So we can support you with project planning and ideation. So sort of we are thinking of starting this type of nutrition incentive program. What do you think? We are here to help you with the considerations that go into developing a successful GusNIP program, be it a pilot, a standard, a large scale. We're here to help. Interpreting the GusNIP RFA, that's a large part of our role. So this is a large document, and we have been supporting applicants for many, many years with this. So we are happy and excited to help you understand, what does line X on page 25 mean? Or can you explain a little bit more about what is meant by this specific policy? So we are here to help you understand the document itself and to prepare your successful application. Evaluation questions, my wonderful colleagues at the Gretchen Swanson Center will share a little bit more about those really important requirements later in this presentation. SNAP, and I forgot to mention NAP policy. We are here to help answer those questions. And also, if there are larger questions around SNAP and NAP policy, communicate them with our partners at the FNS, at the Food and Nutrition Service. And finally, high-level application and administrative reviews. You've heard a lot about grants.gov and using that platform to submit your application. We're also here to support you with that. We have a wonderful consultant who I think she's on the call. Hi, Lydia. Her name is Lydia Sisson, and we'll tell you a little bit more about the services that she can offer you and just understanding the platform to submit your application and really understanding what you need to submit a full and complete package for GusNIP. So next slide. Great. So on page 21 of the RFA, you will read that there is a required letter of support from the NTAE that you need for your application. And the way that you get this is through a 1-hour consultation with the GusNIP NTAE Center, which is a free consultation, and we will help you with support and general pitfalls and general frequently asked questions with the application. So next slide, please. And I'm going to give you more information on that now. Great. So the 2024 GusNIP application requires all applicants to have a consultation session of approximately 1 hour with the NTAE's Nutrition Incentive Hub. And this can be met in a few ways. And this is slightly different than if you've applied in past years. So we'll clarify this here. And when you reach out to us, we'll tell you more about this. So this can be met in a few different ways. This year, we're prioritizing having group sessions. So if you're applying for a pilot grant, we recommend you meet with us for a 1 hour group support session. If you're considering applying for a standard or large scale grant, there's a separate support session for applicants who are interested in both those opportunities. If you're from one of the underrepresented geographies that was mentioned earlier in the presentation, and I believe I have it on the next slide, you will have a one-on-one session. And then also we have a myriad of topical support sessions. So that's a fancy word for these are some frequently asked questions and topics that we've seen over the years are some of the questions that we get most often. So we'll have sessions about IRB, budgeting, incentive technology at grocery stores, CSAs, just a whole large swath of topics that we get a lot of questions about. And this, just to clarify, this webinar that we are all on today does not count towards your required 1 hour consultation. So you'll have to schedule an additional hour to get that required letter of support. So next slide, please. Right, so this, just as a reminder from the RFA, these are the underrepresented geographies. Again, as Ryan shared before, this doesn't mean that if your state isn't listed here that you cannot apply. This just means that these are areas that there are currently not GusNIP Nutrition Incentive grantees that we are looking to solicit more applications from. So if you are from one of these areas, we really encourage you to schedule a one-on-one consultation with the NTAE, but you're more than welcome to schedule a group session as well if you're from one of these areas. So next slide. Great. So how do you schedule this consultation? There's 2 ways you can do it. You can email us at ta@nutritionincentiveHub.org. That is our all-purpose email address. Myself and 2 of our teammates check that email all day, every day, so you will get a response back. And we'll give you more information on how to schedule. Also, my teammate Paola is going to put this link in the chat here. The most direct way to schedule a consultation is through this link, this TFA forms. And you'll just be asked a few basic questions about your program. Where is it located? What kind of grant are you applying for? And then we will suggest what kind of consultation you should schedule based on the answers to that intake survey. Very similar to if you applied for a produce prescription grant, the same intake that you did for that too. Next slide, please. Great. So this is the most important part. So after your consultation with us, we will give you another link to get your letter of support. This is probably the most important thing I'm going to say in my whole presentation is that you as the applicant, after your consultation, are required to request your letter of support. Your application will not be reviewed or pass the administrative review unless you include this letter of support from the NTAE. So you're responsible for scheduling the consultation and attending it. You're responsible for requesting your letter of support. And then the most important part is including the letter in PDF form in field 12 of your application. So if you have any more questions about that, you can reach out to us at our TA@nutritionincentiveHub.org email address, but please reach out, schedule your consultation. It is critical that you do that. So next slide, please. Great. We are going to share these links in the chat too, but there are many resources available to you to support you with your application. So the NTAE has put together many resources on understanding the RFA, evaluation, the really critical budgeting and match requirements, and many more. So please check out our resources online. There are templates, best practices. There's many things that you don't need to reinvent the wheel about when putting together your application. The link for the topical support sessions or the frequently asked question webinars, which also count for your required 1-hour consultation. We also have those listed on the websites, and just general information on your letter of support. And I'm not sure if I have this listed on the next slide, but I'll just share this here, that in addition to all these webinars and templates, we also have specific one-on-one consultations with our consultant. Her name is Lydia, about submitting applications on grants.gov. If you are brand new to GusNIP or submitting a federal grant, we highly recommend you schedule some time to better understand that process earlier rather than later. There are some time-bound parts of getting required documentation, getting required accounts with the grants.gov platform. So please, if you're interested in additional support about grants.gov, do reach out to us so we can support you or have you schedule a support session with Lydia. So next slide, please. Great. And just in general, if you're new to the Nutrition Incentive Hub, we have many ways for you to engage with us. So we have a newsletter, a discussion board, just a very active community of organizations around the country who have GusNIP grants. So please, as you're preparing your application, take some time to check out the website and get a better sense of what projects are currently running, what resources are available, so you know what kind of support you'll have available to you should you receive GusNIP funding. And in general, if you have any questions about anything I just shared, you can reach out to us at TA@nutritionincentiveHub.org. And I believe that's my last slide, so I'm going to pass it over to our teammates at the Gretchen Swanson Center for Nutrition. So thanks, everybody, and I really look forward to meeting with all of you throughout this RFA season.
Thanks, Rachel. My name is Holly Ann Fricke, and I am at the Gretchen Swanson Center for Nutrition. So we are working closely with Fair Food Network, as Rachel said, as part of the NTAE. And now that you've heard a little bit about the hub and all the ways that we can support you throughout the RFA process, I'm going to go over some of the evaluation requirements laid out in the RFA in more detail. So first, we'll start with just some of the basics. Beginning on page 22 of this year's RFA, you'll see the list of reporting and evaluation requirements for nutrition incentive projects. More specifically, all NI grantees are required to cooperate with the NTAE and the USDA as needed. Generally, this means reporting on the core firm and participant level data, but may also mean meeting with the NTAE or the USDA to review project plans or reporting and evaluation protocols or providing documentation upon request. And then in addition, standard and large scale projects are required to contribute to the core minimum data set that you've heard mentioned a couple of times. This again includes the firm level reporting and the participant level surveying annually, which I'll cover in more detail in the next few slides. Pilot project grantees are not required to contribute to the core minimum data set, but are encouraged to do so if possible. And it's important to point out that to facilitate a firm level reporting, grantees are required to have a data use agreement or an MOU with each firm or subgrantee in order to guarantee that the firm is willing to comply and provide the necessary information. And then lastly, all grantees, as part of the outcomes assessment portion of the evaluation, will be required to obtain Institutional Review Board or IRB approval. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Next slide. So now we'll get into some of the more specifics around the evaluation section of the application. Beginning on page 36 in the RFA, it outlines a few additional reporting and evaluation requirements for NI projects. So NI projects are required to conduct and discuss in your application a process assessment that documents the process, challenges, and success of implementation and operations. A process evaluation might include tracking of milestones achieved along the way or other simple metrics, such as checklists that monitor how your project is implemented and whether all of the components were delivered as intended. Broadly, a process assessment looks at implementation or the resources, inputs, and activities portion of the logic model rather than the outcomes. And NI projects are also required to participate in an outcome assessment that documents the project's effectiveness in improving dietary health through increased consumption of fruits and vegetables. Next slide. Before we dive into the details of the core metrics, I just want to take a moment to describe the value and the reasoning behind these core metrics that you've likely read about in the RFA and hopefully have started to explore further on our website. Demonstrating aggregate program impact of nutrition incentive projects contributes to the evidence supporting these programs, and in turn, this has consequences for policy, funding, and program awareness. Having common core metrics collected across programs allows us to compare apples to apples and to dissect what programmatic features work best under which conditions. The core metrics include participant level data in the form of surveys and firm level data, that is data around site characteristics and incentive transactions. Both sets of core metrics are derived from legislative and RFA language. And in developing the core metrics originally several years ago, we weighed these requirements by triangulating what grantees had proposed in their narratives, what programs have collected in the past, the scientific robustness of these measures, including being well tested in low-income populations and grantee capacity. Next slide. So one of the key components of the comprehensive evaluation is conducted at the participant level in the form of a survey. And the NI core survey consists of about 30 items with the main goal of measuring fruit and vegetable consumption and food insecurity, along with incentive program use, sociodemographics, and a few other items. And this survey is to be collected from a subsample of program participants on an annual basis. Gretchen will be putting a link in the chat that describes the survey and the rationale for each module in more detail. And applicants are allowed and encouraged to add additional questions to their participant level surveys if they wish to examine additional impacts of their program, but these are the minimum set of questions that are required. Next slide. So for nutrition incentive participants, we hypothesize that those who have been participating in NI programs for longer periods of time will have higher fruit and vegetable intake as compared to first-time participants. Standard projects are required to survey 100 participants per year, and large-scale projects are required to survey 150 participants per year. If you have a current GusNIP or GusCRR award, this requirement would be in addition to your requirement for those awards. And to ensure data quality and accuracy, the NTAE now requires that all GusNIP grantees use Qualtrics as their survey administration platform. Grantees may use an NTAE-issued Qualtrics account or may use their own account or that of a partner and collaborate their surveys so that the NTAE is able to access them. And having a central platform for all the GusNIP surveys ensures that the required core metrics are set up and coded in the same way across all grantee surveys. And if you need an account, that is provided free of charge to any GusNIP grantee upon award. Next slide. Another important part of the evaluation are what we call firm level core metrics. So these are data reported from firms on a monthly basis and from the grantee and firms on an annual basis. So these data will be reported through a secure web-based portal that has been built out specific for GusNIP reporting. And Gretchen, my colleague, will put a link in the chat with more detailed information on these metrics. And if you are a current GusNIP, GusCRR, or ARPA grantee and or a former FINI grantee, these required metrics should look very familiar to you. Next slide. GusNIP grantees are responsible for submitting different reports, both to NIFA and to the NTAE Center. So to NIFA, you'll be submitting the report technical, report financial, and the SF425 financial reports. And separately, you'll submit firm level and participant level data to the NTAE, like I just discussed. Next slide. Obtaining Institutional Review Board or IRB approval is the final component of the required evaluation. So any project that is collecting data from human subjects or participants via the required survey is required to have IRB approval. This means that IRB is required for all standard and large-scale projects. Pilot projects, again, are not required to contribute to the core metrics, but they're encouraged to do so and may choose to do so, in which case IRB may very well be required. IRB approval does not need to happen as part of your GusNIP proposal or submission, but it is definitely a good thing to start thinking about, especially if you've never worked with an IRB before or haven't identified one to work with yet. And the NTAE can help guide you in this process, both as part of the RFA process as well as following award notification. More information can be found at the link that we'll put in the chat. And we also will be hosting a webinar all about IRB later in April. Next slide. Here we have a timeline to help you see the recommended IRB process starting from the proposal phase that you're in now. In the proposal phase, and while you wait to hear back about award notification, the most important thing to do related to IRB is really just to ensure that you have identified and connected with an IRB. Having this connection established will make the process much quicker and smoother upon award notification. Next slide. And lastly, I just want to mention that the NTAE recommends adding a line item in your proposed budget specifically for reporting and evaluation, which might include IRB costs, an external evaluator, and data collection costs, such as stipends to participants for completing the survey, among many other possible costs. We suggest planning for evaluation to be about 10% of your total budget, depending on the scope of your proposed project. And we have a great resource on our website to help you think through all the possible costs associated with reporting and evaluation that can help with building this piece of your budget. So we'll link to that in the chat. And budgeting in general, as well as budgeting specifically for reporting and evaluation, is definitely a great topic for your one-on-one or group consultation call with the NTAE if you have specific questions. Next slide. And lastly, just another reminder of where you can get in touch with us, where you can find all of the resources that we talked about today and many more. So like Rachel highlighted earlier, please feel free to reach out to us via email. We can get you set up with a consultation. Please check out the website for lots of the resources we talked about today and lots more, and we'll be adding more throughout the RFA period. And then we'll put the link in the chat one more time for scheduling a consultation directly. Thank you all.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jillian Kaplan. I'm with the Food and Nutrition Service Retailer Policy Division. And I'm going to talk today a little bit specifically about SNAP policy and how this applies to GusNIP. And then my colleague Jill Schaefer works with NAP, the Nutrition Assistance Program. and can also speak to policy regarding NAP if you have further questions on that. Next slide, please. All right, so today's presentation will be a targeted look at the ways GusNIP and SNAP or NAP overlap, and also how our teams work together. We'll go over some project designs that have additional requirements to be SNAP or NAP compliant, some disallowed project designs, when to contact the SNAP team, key project design elements, the difference between SNAP or NAP and EBT, and the incentive models that the projects use. And we also have a slide of additional resources that will be available to you after the presentation. Next slide, please. All right, I'm gonna discuss some SNAP policy points to keep in mind when thinking about your project or program. EBT cards are considered personal identifiable information and therefore cannot be stored or used in any way. This includes the partial usage of numbers. Due to increasing instances of fraud, such as card skimming, EBT card numbers must not be utilized to track purchases or be stored by grantees. EBT card numbers should not be used to track SNAP participant engagement with the GusNIP program in any way. Additionally, FNS has created a new form for reporting firms in order to increase efficiency. So if receiving funding, please use this form when sending in monthly firm reports. When using tokens and script, farmers markets must provide refunds to SNAP customers for any unused tokens or script. As project directors, please ensure that your partner firms are providing refunds to SNAP customers. FNS has recently received complaints from SNAP beneficiaries indicating they're not being provided these refunds, so we want to make sure that's happening. E-tokens are not currently approved for use under current SNAP rules. The use of e-tokens would require a demonstration waiver, which is very rare. The demonstration waiver that is currently in place to allow for the use of script does not extend to e-tokens. Online purchasing and online ordering have become more popular in recent years. We want to make a clear distinction between online purchasing, which requires making an EBT payment online and requires a separate authorization from FNS. However, ordering online requires that a payment be made in person by the SNAP recipient when an order is delivered or picked up and does not require a separate authorization. And it does not collect payment on an online platform. So those are two distinct things. The GusNIP Nutrition Incentive Program proposals that involve online ordering must include a detailed description of how the process will work from the perspective of the SNAP or NAP household and the retailer. NAP Puerto Rico offers purchase online. Through purchase online, NAP Puerto Rico participants may select their groceries through approved food retailer online sites and then complete the payment transaction at the retailer store when they pick up their food. So that's specific to NAP Puerto Rico. Next slide. I also wanted to provide a bit of background about FNS's role in the GusNIP program. FNS provides NIFA, both SNAP and NAP policy guidance. FNS is responsible for the SNAP retailer participation component, which includes retailer authorization and SNAP retailer compliance. I want to note that in territories with block grants for the NAP program, so Northern Marianas Islands, American Samoa, and Puerto Rico, the respective governments are responsible for this. Otherwise, FNS is responsible for retailer authorization. FNS provides policy oversight related to the issuance and redemption of incentives and the impact on state or territory EBT and retailer point of sale systems. Next slide. Here is a quick overview of partner firm responsibilities. Here we go. SNAP and NAP are distinct food assistance programs with their own program rules and regulations. Applicants must follow the policies of the respective food assistance program that their nutrition incentive projects partner with. We will highlight some of the key differences between NAP and SNAP as we review the rules and regulations. Next slide. Here are some common things we've seen in proposals that go beyond the scope of the grant. If you receive a proposal, or if you're working with a proposal that uses any of these, it probably will not be advanced, so please be aware. So purchasing inventory for partner firms is not allowed within the scope of the grant. The statute governing SNAP, with very limited exceptions, also prohibits federal funds from being used to purchase point of sale equipment for retailers. Grantees and retailers cannot use GusNIP to work around the statutory requirement. The purpose of the program isn't to equip retailers. Upgrades leading to a more efficient delivery of the incentive might be allowed. If this comes up, please do reach out. Requiring any kind of evaluation of recipients in order to participate in the program or receive an incentive is not allowed. Examples include, but are not limited to, focus groups and mandatory surveys. E-tokens are not currently allowed under the Food and Nutrition Act. The use of e-tokens would require a demonstration waiver, as mentioned. The current demonstration waiver in place allows the use of physical script, tokens, and receipts. This does not extend to e-tokens. Any method of converting SNAP benefits to another form of digital tender is prohibited. Next slide, please. All right, so as a quick review, so some proposals are not compliant with SNAP or NAP rules and would need further modification to move forward. Some proposals would come with extra requirements to be compliant with SNAP or NAP rules. And our teams are here to clarify when the situations come up. And if you have any questions, so please do reach out. Next slide. How a project design deals with refunds and EBT transactions must be fully fleshed out, detailing how a SNAP or NAP transaction will trigger the incentive and how refunds will be handled to ensure that households are not able to get the incentive without the required SNAP or NAP purchase. Northern Mariana Islands and American Samoa use paper coupons and do not have a refund policy. But otherwise, refunds would need to be ensured in the project design. Next slide, please. Refunds of food purchased with SNAP tokens and SNAP or NAP benefits must be returned to the SNAP or NAP household's EBT card through a refund transaction on an EBT point of sales machine. The refund should subtract any earned GusNIP incentives. Refunds for any food purchased with SNAP or NAP benefits or with tokens can never be made in cash. Providing cash refunds for SNAP tokens or food purchased with SNAP or NAP benefits is considered a serious violation of SNAP or NAP rules and can have lasting legal ramifications for any firm engaging in such practices. So never use cash. I want to note that Puerto Rico's NAP uses EBT cards and does not issue tokens. The Northern Mariana Islands and American Samoa's NAP use paper coupons and do not have a refund policy. Next slide. Here on this slide is a simple example of how refunds should work. A proposal must detail how this process will run successfully in their project design. For example, the receipt could indicate what the SNAP benefit and what the GusNIP incentive are and distinguish them. The proposal must explain how they will identify what was bought with what. As a reminder, this example would only apply to Puerto Rico NAP with the NAP program. Next slide. Here's an example of a refund process involving script. The shopper must return an equal amount of SNAP and incentive tokens. This is one example of a compliant process. Whatever program design your application proposes, they must demonstrate how they will ensure this outcome. I want to note that this does not apply for NAP. Currently, none of the NAP programs use script. For Northern Mariana Islands and American Samoa NAP, there is no exchange of paper coupons for farmers market script. Puerto Rico NAP participants can purchase fresh agricultural products at family market venues with NAP benefits through the EBT card. Next slide, please. SNAP electronic benefits transfer, the EBT card. In Puerto Rico, NAP EBT cards and American Samoa NAP and Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands NAP numerically serialized paper coupons, and these are issued by the individual state and territory SNAP or NAP agencies. Under federal SNAP or NAP rules, neither EBT cards nor NAP paper coupons may be altered in any way. EBT cards and coupons, again, cannot be altered in any way. These cards and coupons are property of state SNAP agencies or NAP administering agencies. Grantees and retailers may not place barcodes or stickers on an EBT card or coupon. This could be interpreted as showing some kind of affiliation or preference. Altering the card in any form may unintentionally indicate that the federal government or state agency or territory is endorsing certain goods, services, or certain retailers over others. So no alterations are allowed. Next slide. SNAP or NAP and EBT overlap. They overlap but are not the same. I want to go over some situations that demonstrate their differences and show why we see a lot of questions and confusions around this area. Next slide. Any proposal dealing with SNAP or NAP and EBT must address a method for identifying transactions. Applicants have to show how they'll differentiate between cash benefits and SNAP or NAP benefits, SNAP or NAP authorized stores and non-authorized stores, and SNAP or NAP eligible food items versus ineligible items. Next slide, please. There are 3 allowable models for incentives to be earned or redeemed. The first one is the purchase of GusNIP eligible fruits and vegetables, triggering a GusNIP incentive, which can then be used to purchase more GusNIP eligible fruits and vegetables. The second is any SNAP or NAP eligible food purchase triggering a GusNIP incentive, which can then be used to purchase GusNIP eligible fruits and vegetables. The third is the purchase of GusNIP eligible fruits and vegetables triggering a GusNIP incentive, which can then be used to purchase any SNAP or NAP eligible foods. These incentive models can also be found on page 3 of the RFA, so please look there for reference. SNAP eligible foods encompass almost any food or beverage item without restrictions on specific ingredients. Please look at our FNS website. We have a page on SNAP eligible food items for more information about what foods may be purchased with SNAP benefits. Eligible foods for each NAP block grant differ from SNAP, so please consult the respective NAP administering agency for the most up-to-date information. You can find the websites with contact information for these agencies on also page, on page 13 of the RFA. Thank you. Next slide. All right, so I want to make a special note about CSA, community supported agriculture models. Many past GusNIP applicants have proposed a CSA model. However, SNAP policy does affect how a CSA might normally be carried out with SNAP benefits. The window between a SNAP purchase and receiving the actual food is limited to 14 days. So do keep that in mind if you are using a CSA model. And SNAP benefits can only be used for food purchases. They cannot cover membership fees. Okay, that wraps up the SNAP and NAP policy portion of the presentation. So please do reach out. Here's contact information if you have any questions. And thank you so much for listening today.
Thank you so much, Jillian, for wrapping us up here. I know a number of our questions have been answered in the Q&A box, but we want to allow an opportunity for any questions to be posed and answered here as well before we finish off today. Are there any outstanding questions in the Q&A box?
Ryan, there are a few SNAP related questions in the Q&A, so we'll give some time for those to be answered.
Sure. And if you have any other questions that you'd like to pose, please feel free to put those in as well. I do see we have a raised hand. Do we want to allow them to come over and ask a question, Dr. Grimes, or you want to ask them to put it into the Q&A box? Oh, I see the hand is lowered now, but
Probably have them put it in the Q&A. That way it's recorded there.
sure.
We do want to mention that if after this webinar you think of more questions or you need clarifications, feel free to reach out to us and email us at those emails that were listed during the presentation. This presentation it has been recorded, and it's going to be this webinar along with the slides will be posted online shortly. So that you'll be able to refer back to this later as you're developing your application. Thank you, Jamilis, for the SNAP-NAP policy FAQs. It looks like we have two more questions in the Q&A. One of them is being answered right now. If somebody wouldn't mind jumping on the other one, that would be great. Are there any other questions? The last couple of questions are being answered for today. Again, the link for this webinar was put in the chat, so you'll have access to that. Yes, yes, your questions, I see here a reminder. Yes, the question is being answered right now. As we're wrapping up this Q&A time here, I see that Beth is answering a final question regarding in-kind transfer. As we're wrapping up our Q&A time here, I do want to remind you that if you're interested in becoming a reviewer for the Nutrition Incentive Panel, then the link for that, or the where you can sign up, is in the chat box. So you can click on that and put in your information, and you'll be contacted if it fits the specifications for the panel. Okay, the last question looks like there are no more questions in the box. If we don't have any other questions, and again, if you have other questions that you think of after this webinar, you can feel free to reach out to us, and we will respond as quickly as we can, whether it be NIFA or the NTAE or FNS. We'd be happy to work with you as you all are developing your applications. Again, reread the RFA multiple times. Make sure that you have all the requirements in hand. I can answer. There is not another webinar scheduled. I noticed this one just came up. There's not another webinar scheduled. However, this one will be recorded and it will be uploaded where the funding opportunity is, and you can find that within the chat. The NTAE will be hosting a few, I believe, though, however, but this is the only webinar for this, for the RFA. Please read the RFA multiple times. Make sure you're well aware of everything. Make sure that you know all the requirements. Make sure you stay within the due date as well as the page limits, whether that be for a pilot, standard, or large-scale project. Before you hit send to grants.gov, or submit, I should say, please triple check everything to make sure that you have all the required documents. And I want one more final reminder that they all are in PDF. They have to be in PDF for us to be able to read those. Okay. This last question is being answered. All right, if there are no other questions, does anybody from the panel have anything else they would like to add? All right, well, this will conclude our webinar for the FY24 technical art FY24 GusNIP Nutrition Incentive Program Technical Assistance Webinar. We appreciate your time and your attention. If you have any questions, please reach out to us, and we look forward to seeing you. Thanks again, you all.
Thank you all.